The blue flames of dying starships lit up the darkness of space as Commander Veltar watched another of his vessels explode into pieces. The sleek Zephyrian cruiser had been trying to escape when 3 Korthok attack ships surrounded it like hungry wolves. Now all that remained was floating metal and the screams of his people over the communication channels. Veltar pressed his long blue fingers against the smooth surface of his command console. His large golden eyes reflected the orange glow of the burning ships outside. The bridge of his flagship was quiet, except for the soft beeping of warning signals. Every member of his crew knew they were losing this war. "Sir, we have lost contact with the 7th Fleet," reported his communications officer, a young Zephyrian female named Kira. Her voice shook as she spoke. "The Korthok swarm has destroyed 3 more of our defense stations." The war had been going on for 3 long years. At first, the Zephyrian Empire thought they could handle the Korthok invasion. Their energy shields were the best in the galaxy. Their plasma weapons could cut through almost any armor. They had defended their worlds against pirates and raiders for centuries, but the Korthok were different. They were not like other enemies the Zephyrians had faced before. The insect-like aliens moved in perfect coordination, as if they all shared the same mind. When one Korthok ship died, the others immediately knew how it happened and changed their tactics. They learned from every battle and became stronger. The Korthok had already taken 12 star systems from the Zephyrian Empire. Billions of blue-skinned people had died or been captured. The surviving Zephyrians talked in whispers about what happened to those who were taken alive. The Korthok did not take prisoners to exchange later. They took them to feed their growing army. "How many ships do we have left?" Veltar asked his tactical officer. "Only 47 combat vessels remain in this sector, Commander. The rest of our fleet is scattered across 6 different systems, trying to protect the civilian evacuation." "Ships?" Veltar closed his eyes and took a deep breath. The air recycling system on his ship made a soft humming sound that usually helped him think. Today, it only reminded him that they were running out of time. The Korthok would not stop until every Zephyrian world was under their control. "Send another message to the Meridian Confederation," he ordered. "Tell them we need their help now. Not next month. Not next week now." The Meridians had been allies of the Zephyrian Empire for over 200 years. They were a peaceful race that preferred to solve problems with words instead of weapons. Their ships were beautiful and their technology was advanced, but they moved slowly when it came to military action. "They had been promising to send help for 6 months, sir." "I have been sending requests to the Meridians every day," Kira said. "They always give the same answer. They say their council is still discussing the matter. They say they need more time to prepare their forces." "More time," Veltar repeated with anger in his voice. "How much time do they think we have?" "We'll be at our home world in 2 weeks if we cannot stop them here." Outside the bridge windows, another battle was taking place. Zephyrian fighters danced between the larger Korthok ships, their blue energy weapons creating bright lines across the darkness. But for every Korthok ship they destroyed, 2 more appeared to take its place. The insect aliens seemed to have an endless supply of vessels and warriors. "Commander, I am detecting a large fleet approaching from the outer rim," called out the sensor officer. "The energy signatures are strange. I have never seen anything like them before." Veltar opened his eyes and looked at the main display screen. Hundreds of small dots were moving toward their position. The computer was having trouble identifying what type of ships they were. The energy readings were unlike anything in their database. "Could it be the Meridians?" Kira asked with hope in her voice. "Maybe they finally developed new technology to help us." "Run a full spectrum analysis," Veltar ordered. "I want to know everything about those ships before they get here." The sensor officer worked quickly, his fingers moving across his control panel. "Sir, there are over 300 vessels in that fleet. They are using some kind of propulsion system we do not recognize. Their armor appears to be made of metal instead of energy-resistant materials. And they are broadcasting on communication frequencies that are not in our records." Veltar felt a small spark of hope in his chest. Maybe the Meridians had secretly been working on new weapons and ships. Maybe they had finally decided to take the Korthok threat seriously. Maybe his people would survive after all. "Try to contact them," he said. "Use the standard Meridian greeting protocols. While his communications officer worked to establish contact with the approaching fleet, Veltar thought about his family back on the Zephyrian homeworld. His mate and their 2 young children were living in underground shelters, waiting to hear if the war would reach them. He had not spoken to them in weeks because he was afraid his voice would reveal how hopeless their situation had become. Far away from the battle, on the other side of the galaxy, Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of his ship and listened to the strange alien message coming through their communication system. The human vessel Retribution was massive compared to most Earth ships, but it was still small next to some of the alien vessels they had encountered during their first year of interstellar travel. Jake was a tall man with short brown hair and steady gray eyes. He had been commanding starships for 15 years, but only the last 2 had been in deep space. Before that, he had served in Earth's orbital defense fleet, protecting the home planet from asteroids and space debris. "Can you clean up that signal?" he asked Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez, who was working at the communication station. Amy was a young woman from California who had joined the Space Force because she wanted to be part of humanity's expansion into the stars. "I'm trying," Captain Amy replied. "The translation computer is having trouble with their language. It sounds like they are asking for help. Something about an invasion and needing military support." Jake looked at the star map display on the main screen. Their fleet of human ships was supposed to be conducting training exercises in this region of space. They had been practicing formation flying and testing their new weapon systems. None of them had expected to receive a distress call from an alien civilization. "How far away is the source of that signal?" Jake asked his navigation officer. "About 6 light years, sir. If we use maximum hyperspace speed, we could be there in 4 hours. Jake made his decision quickly. That was one of the things that made him a good captain. He did not waste time thinking about what might go wrong. When people needed help, you helped them. It was that simple. "Contact Admiral Kane back at Earth Command," he ordered. "Tell her we have received a distress call from an alien species. Under attack. Request permission to investigate and offer assistance." The response from Earth came back within 30 minutes. Admiral Lisa Kane, the commander of all human space forces, had given them permission to answer the alien distress call. She was also sending additional ships to support them, but those would take longer to arrive. "All ships, this is Captain Morrison," Jake announced over the fleet communication channel. "We are changing course to respond to an alien distress call. This will be our first official contact with a species at war. Everyone needs to be ready for anything." As the human fleet prepared to jump to hyperspace, none of them knew they were about to arrive in the middle of a battle that would change the history of the galaxy forever. The human fleet dropped out of hyperspace in a flash of blue light. Captain Jake Morrison felt his stomach turn as the ship's artificial gravity adjusted to normal space. Around him, his bridge crew worked quickly to scan their new surroundings. What they found was chaos. "Captain, we have multiple fleets engaged in combat," reported Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez from her sensor station. "I'm reading 3 different types of ships, all firing at each other." Jake looked at the main display screen and saw a battlefield unlike anything he had ever imagined. Streams of bright energy weapons crossed the darkness between hundreds of ships. Explosions bloomed like deadly flowers as vessels were destroyed. The space around them was filled with floating debris and escape pods. "Those are the ships that sent the distress call," Amy continued, pointing to a group of sleek blue vessels. "But there are 2 other fleets here. One looks like giant insects, and the other ... double quotes. She paused, checking her readings again. "The other fleet has ships I don't recognize at all." Commander Ben Taylor, captain of the heavy cruiser Defiance, contacted Jake over the communication channel. "Morrison, are you seeing this? We just jumped into the middle of a 3-way war." Jake nodded, even though Ben could not see him. The human fleet had expected to find aliens fighting an invasion force. Instead, they had found something much more complicated. 3 different species were all shooting at each other, and none of them looked friendly. "Amy, try to contact the ships that sent the distress signal," Jake ordered. "Use the same frequency they used to call for help on the Zephyrian flagship." Commander Veltar was staring at his display screen in confusion. The approaching fleet did not look like Meridian ships at all. These vessels were gray and bulky, with sharp angles and strange weapon systems. They did not have the smooth, flowing design that the Meridians preferred. "Sir, they are trying to communicate with us," Kira reported. "But these are not Meridian signals. The language is completely unknown." Veltar felt his hope turning into worry. If these were not the Meridians, then who were they? Another enemy species coming to claim Zephyrian territory? Or perhaps allies of the Korthok arriving to help finish the invasion? "Put them on the main screen," Veltar ordered. The image that appeared surprised everyone on the Zephyrian bridge. Instead of the tall, graceful Meridians they expected, they saw a creature with pale skin, short brown hair, and strange small eyes. The being was wearing some kind of military uniform and appeared to be trying to speak. "This is Captain Jake Morrison of the Earth Defense Force," the creature said. The translation computer was working slowly, turning his words into Zephyrian language with a delay. "We received your distress call and have come to offer assistance." "Earth Defense Force," Veltar repeated. He had never heard of this species or their home world. "What is Earth? Where do you come from?" Jake tried to answer, but the translation system was having problems. The conversation became confusing as both sides struggled to understand each other. The Zephyrian spoke quickly and used many technical terms that the human computers could not translate. The humans used military expressions that made no sense to the aliens. While they were trying to communicate, the Korthok swarm had noticed the new arrivals. The insect-like aliens had a simple way of thinking about unknown ships. If it was not part of their hive, it was either food or an obstacle to be removed. A group of 30 Korthok attack ships broke away from their battle with the Zephyrians and moved toward the human fleet. These ships looked like giant metal beetles with multiple weapon systems and thick armored plating. They moved in perfect formation, as if controlled by a single mind. "Captain, we have incoming hostiles," reported the tactical officer on Jake's ship. 30 alien vessels approaching fast. They are powering up weapons. Jake looked at the screen and saw the insect-like ships moving toward them. He had hoped for peaceful first contact with alien species, but it looked like they were going to have to fight instead. "All ships, this is Morrison," he announced over the fleet communication channel. "We are about to engage unknown hostiles. Remember, we don't know anything about their weapons or tactics. Stay alert and watch each other's backs." The Korthok ships opened fire first. Streams of green energy weapons shot out from their vessels, targeting the human ships. But something strange happened. The energy beams hit the human armor and scattered in all directions, like light bouncing off a mirror. Chief Engineer Carlos Mendez had spent months working on the armor systems for the human fleet. He had designed the outer hull plating to be highly reflective, knowing that most advanced alien species would probably use energy weapons. The modification had been untested in real combat, but now it was saving their lives. "Direct hit on the Defiant," Amy reported. "No damage. Their energy weapons are not penetrating our hull." Jake smiled grimly. "All ships, returned fire. Use kinetic weapons only. Let's see how they handle good old-fashioned bullets." The human ships began shooting back, but not with energy weapons like the aliens expected. Instead, they fired missiles, railgun projectiles, and explosive charges. The Korthok had never faced kinetic weapons before. Their armor was designed to stop energy beams, not solid objects moving at incredible speed. The first human missile hit a Korthok ship and tore through its hull like paper. The explosion sent pieces of insect-like creatures spinning into space. The other Korthok ships immediately changed their attack pattern, but they were not sure how to defend against weapons they had never seen before. Meanwhile, the Zephyrians were watching this battle with growing amazement. The unknown species was not only surviving against the Korthok, they were winning. Commander Veltar had seen the Korthok destroy hundreds of ships with their green energy weapons. How were these strangers deflecting the same attacks that had killed so many of his people? "Sir, the new arrivals are using some kind of solid projectile weapons," his tactical officer reported. "The Korthok ships are taking heavy damage," but the situation became more complicated when some of the Zephyrian ships began targeting the human vessels as well. Many Zephyrian captains thought the humans might be another enemy species, or perhaps advanced Korthok ships in disguise. In the confusion of battle, they decided it was safer to shoot first and ask questions later. "We're taking fire from the blue ships too," Commander Taylor reported from the Defiance. "The aliens we came to help are shooting at us." Jake felt frustrated. They had come to answer a distress call, but now everyone was treating them like enemies. "Amy, can you get through to their commander again?" "I'm trying, Captain, but our translation system is still having problems. I think they're as confused as we are." The battle continued to rage around them. Human ships found themselves fighting both the insect-like Korthok and some of the blue Zephyrian vessels. It was exactly the kind of situation that could lead to a disaster for everyone involved. Lieutenant Sarah Brooks was piloting one of the human fighter craft when she noticed something important. Some of the blue alien ships were protecting damaged vessels instead of continuing to attack. Unlike the insect ships, which seemed focused only on destruction, the blue aliens were trying to rescue their wounded. "Captain Morrison, this is Brooks." In Fighter 7, she called over the communication channel. "I think the blue aliens are trying to save their people, not kill them all. Maybe they're not our enemies." Jake thought about this as he watched the battle develop. The blue aliens fought differently than the insect creatures. They seemed to care about their losses and tried to minimize damage to their own ships. The insects, on the other hand, threw themselves into battle without any concern for casualties. "Human ships, focus fire on the insect vessels only," Jake ordered. "Do not fire on the blue ships unless they fire on you first. Amy, keep trying to contact their commander. We need to sort this out before we all get killed." As the battle continued, both the humans and the Zephyrians began to realize they were fighting the same enemy. But with communication problems and the chaos of three-way combat, it was going to take time to turn confusion into cooperation. The battle was not going the way anyone had expected. The Korthok swarm, which had been winning against the Zephyrians for months, suddenly found themselves confused and taking heavy losses. The humans were fighting in ways that made no sense to the insect-like aliens. Captain Jake Morrison watched from his bridge as human fighter pilots performed maneuvers that would have been impossible for most alien species. Lieutenant Sarah Brooks dove her small fighter ship between two massive Korthok cruisers, using their own bulk to shield herself from enemy fire. As the insect ships tried to target her, they ended up shooting each other instead. "Brooks, what are you doing out there?" Jake called over the communication channel. "That's not in any flight manual I've read." Sarah's voice came back with excitement and adrenaline. "Sorry, Captain, but their formation is too rigid. They can't adapt when someone doesn't follow their expected patterns. I'm using their own ships." As Kova, this was exactly the kind of creative thinking that made humans different from other species. While the Zephyrians followed careful battle plans and the Korthok moved in perfect hive mind coordination, humans made things up as they went along. Each pilot and captain made independent decisions based on what they saw in front of them. Colonel Ryan Murphy was commanding the Marine assault ships from his vessel Thunderstrike. He had been watching the battle develop and noticed something important about how the aliens fought. Both the Zephyrians and the Korthok kept their distance from each other, exchanging long-range energy weapon fire like ancient sailing ships trading cannon volleys. "All assault ships, this is Murphy," he announced. "We're going to try something different. Close to point-blank range and board the enemy vessels." His officers were shocked. "Sir, boarding enemy ships in the middle of a space battle? That's incredibly dangerous." "Dangerous for us, maybe," Murphy replied with a grin, "but I bet they've never seen anything like it before. Sometimes the best defense is to do something so crazy that nobody expects it." The human assault ships were different from their fighters and cruisers. They were heavily armored and designed to get close to enemy vessels. Each one carried 100 Marines trained for combat in zero-gravity and alien environments. When the first human assault ship approached a Korthok cruiser, the insect aliens were confused. In their experience, ships either fought at long range or retreated. They had never seen anyone deliberately move close enough to touch hulls. The human ship attached itself to the Korthok vessel like a parasite. Cutting tools burned through the alien hull, and armed Marines poured into the enemy ship. The Korthok had never faced borders before. Their entire military doctrine was based on ship-to-ship combat, not hand-to-hand fighting inside their own vessels. Chief Engineer Carlos Mendez was monitoring the battle from the engine room of the Retribution. He had been making constant adjustments to their ship's systems based on what he learned about alien weapons. The reflective armor was working well against energy weapons, but he wanted to do more. Captain Morrison, he called over the intercom. I've been analyzing the enemy fire patterns. The blue aliens use a different frequency of energy weapon than the insects. If I adjust our hull plating, we might be able to reflect their shots back at the enemy. Jake was amazed by his engineer's quick thinking. Do it, Carlos. Whatever you think will work. Within minutes, Carlos had reconfigured the outer hull of several human ships. Now, when the Korthok fired their green energy weapons, the beams bounced off the human vessels and struck other Korthok ships instead. The aliens found themselves being destroyed by their own weapons. Commander Veltar watched this incredible display from his Zephyrian flagship. In 3 years of fighting the Korthok, he had never seen them take losses like this. The unknown species was not just surviving against the swarm, they were making the insects look foolish. How are they doing this? Asked his tactical officer. Their ships look primitive compared to ours, but they're winning. Veltar studied the battle more carefully. The human ships did look crude compared to Zephyrian vessels. They were made of metal instead of advanced composites. Their weapons were simple projectiles instead of sophisticated energy systems. But somehow, this primitive approach was more effective than all of the Zephyrian Empire's advanced technology. They fight like no species I have ever seen, Veltar said quietly. Look at their formations. Each ship moves independently, but they still work together, and they take risks that would terrify any sane commander. Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez had finally managed to establish better communication with the Zeph flagship. The translation system was working more smoothly now, and she could understand most of what the blue aliens were saying. Captain, I have Commander Veltar on the line, she reported to Jake. He wants to know why we're helping them. Jake thought about how to answer that question. Tell him we received their distress call and came to help. That's what civilized people do when someone asks for assistance. When this message was translated and sent to the Zephyrian commander, Veltar was surprised. In his experience, species only helped each other when they had something to gain. Trade agreements, territorial rights, or military alliances were always part of any cooperation between different peoples. They came just because we asked for help. Veltar asked Kira. They don't want anything in return. Meanwhile, the Korthok were learning that their usual tactics were useless against the humans. The hive mind that controlled their fleet was designed to process information from thousands of ships and coordinate perfect attacks, but the chaotic human fighting style generated too much unpredictable data for the collective intelligence to handle. When Korthok ship 1247 was destroyed by a reflected energy beam, the hive mind learned to avoid that particular attack angle. But then Human Fighter 23 performed a maneuver that had never been recorded before, destroying ship 1248 in a completely different way. Before the hive mind could process this new information and adapt, Human Cruiser 7 did something else entirely. Unexpected, the cumulative effect was like trying to solve 1,000 different puzzles at the same time. The Korthok collective intelligence, which had been their greatest strength, became a weakness when faced with opponents who refused to follow any predictable patterns. Dr. Helen Garcia was serving as the fleet's diplomatic officer, though she had never expected to use her skills in the middle of a space battle. She had been a professor of international relations at Harvard before joining the Space Force, and her job was to help establish peaceful contact with alien civilizations. Captain Morrison, she called from her station. I think I'm beginning to understand the situation here. The blue aliens called for help from someone called the Meridians. They're expecting their allies to arrive, but we showed up instead. This explained why the Zephyrians had been suspicious of the human fleet. They were waiting for friends and got strangers instead. In their desperate situation, strangers could be just as dangerous as enemies. Can you convince them we're on their side? Jake asked. I'm working on it, Helen replied. But actions speak louder than words. If we keep protecting their damaged ships and focusing our attacks on the insects, they'll figure out we're not their enemies. Master Sergeant Tony Lopez was leading one of the boarding parties that had taken control of a Korthok cruiser. What his Marines found inside the alien ship disturbed them greatly. The Korthok were not just warriors, they were parasites. The Ship contained thousands of captured aliens from dozens of different species, all being prepared for some kind of horrible process. "Captain, you need to see this," Tony reported over his helmet communicator. "These insects aren't just invading territory, they're collecting people, living people." Jake felt his anger rise as he listened to the sergeant's report. The Korthok were not just conquerors, they were slavers, or worse. This changed everything about how the humans would fight this battle. "All ships, this is Morrison," he announced. "Over the fleet channel, we have confirmation that the insect ships are carrying prisoners from multiple species. Rescue operations are now a priority. Board every enemy vessel you can and get those people out." The human fleet's tactics shifted immediately. Instead of just destroying Korthok ships, they began capturing them. Marines swarmed aboard enemy vessels, fighting through corridors filled with hostile aliens to reach the prisoner compartments. This was something neither the Zephyrians nor the Korthok had ever seen before. Most species in the galaxy would simply destroy enemy ships and consider any prisoners an acceptable loss. But the humans were risking their own lives to save people they had never met, including some who had been shooting at them just minutes earlier. Commander Veltar watched in amazement as human Marines evacuated Zephyrian survivors from a damaged Korthok ship. The same species that had seemed like invaders was now saving his people's lives. The battle had been raging for 2 hours when everything began to change. Commander Veltar stood on his bridge watching human Marines carry wounded Zephyrians to safety from a burning ship. These strange aliens had arrived without warning, been fired upon by both sides, and yet they were still trying to save everyone they could reach. "Sir, the human commander is requesting direct communication," Kira reported from her station. "Their translation system seems to be working better now." Veltar nodded. "Put him through." Captain Jake Morrison appeared on the main screen of the Zephyrian flagship. His uniform was torn and there was blood on his forehead from where a piece of debris had hit him during the battle. But his eyes were clear and determined. "Commander Veltar," Jake said, the words now translating smoothly into Zephyrian language. "My name is Jake Morrison, captain of the Earth Defense Force. We came because we heard your distress call. We want to help you fight these invaders." For the first time in months, Veltar felt real hope. "Captain Morrison, I must apologize. My ships fired on yours because we thought you might be enemies. We were expecting our allies, the Meridians, to arrive." "No apology needed," Jake replied. "In your situation, I would have done the same thing. But now we need to work together. These Korthok are not just invading your space, they're taking prisoners from every species they defeat. We found thousands of captives on their ships." Veltar felt sick. His people had suspected the Korthok were taking prisoners, but they had hoped the missing Zephyrians had simply been killed. In battle, the truth was much worse. "What do you propose we do?" Veltar asked. "Coordinate our attacks," Jake answered. "Your energy weapons are more powerful than ours, but they can't penetrate Korthok armor very well. Our kinetic weapons punch right through their holes. If we work together, we can destroy their fleet and rescue all the prisoners." Dr. Helen Garcia was working with the Zephyrian communication officers to establish a proper command network between the two fleets. She had never tried to coordinate military operations with aliens before, but the basic principles were the same as human military cooperation. "The key is sharing information in real time," she explained to both human and Zephyr officers. "If our ships can tell your ships where to aim, and your ships can tell our ships where the enemy is weakest, we'll be much more effective." Master Sergeant Tony Lopez was leading his third boarding operation of the day. This time his target was a massive Korthok command ship that was twice the size of any vessel they had encountered before. His Marines had rescued over 200 prisoners from smaller ships, but intelligence suggested this larger vessel held thousands more. Remember, these insects fight differently inside their ships than they do in space, Tony told his Marines as their assault craft approached the enemy vessel. "They use narrow corridors and try to funnel us into kill zones. Stay together and watch for ambushes." The Marines cut through the Korthok hull and poured into the alien ship. What they found inside was like a nightmare. The corridors were filled with a thick, sweet-smelling fog that made breathing difficult. Strange organic growths covered the walls, pulsing with their own light, and everywhere, the sound of clicking and chittering as the Korthok defenders moved to intercept them. "This place gives me the creeps," muttered Corporal Lisa Wong as she followed Tony through a corridor lined with what looked like giant cocoons. "What do you think they're growing in those things?" Tony did not want to think about it. "Just keep moving. Our job is to find the prisoners and get them out." Meanwhile, in space, the combined human and Zephyrian fleet was systematically destroying the Korthok invasion force. The aliens had learned to coordinate their attacks, with Zephyrian ships using their powerful energy weapons to weaken enemy shields, while human ships followed up with kinetic weapons to penetrate the hulls. Lieutenant Sarah Brooks was leading a squadron of human fighters in an attack on a group of Korthok destroyers. The insect ships were trying to retreat, but the human pilots were not letting them escape. "This is Brooks to all fighters," she called over the communication channel. "Don't let any of them get away. If they escape, they'll just come back with reinforcements." The Korthok were learning that retreat was not an option against humans. Most species in the galaxy fought until they had achieved their objectives or until the cost became too high. Then they withdrew to fight another day. But humans seemed to believe that if you started a fight, you finished it. Chief Engineer Carlos Mendez had been monitoring the battle from the engine room when he noticed something disturbing. "Captain Morrison, I'm detecting a massive energy build-up from one of the large Korthok ships. I think they're preparing some kind of super weapon." Jake looked at his tactical display and saw what Carlos was talking about. One of the largest Korthok vessels, a ship that looked like a giant metal wasp, was gathering energy from all around it. Smaller Korthok ships were actually transferring their power to the larger vessel. "All ships, this is Morrison," Jake announced. "Priority target is the large wasp-shaped vessel. Whatever they're charging up, we can't let them use it." But before the human and Zephyrian ships could focus their fire on the target, the Korthok super weapon activated. A beam of pure energy shot out from the wasp ship, striking one of the Zephyrian cruisers. The alien vessel simply vanished, vaporized completely by the attack. "Dear God," whispered Amy Rodriguez from her station. "That thing can destroy our largest ships with a single shot." Commander Veltar felt despair creeping back into his heart. Just when it seemed like they might win this battle, the Korthok revealed a weapon that could destroy any ship in a single hit. How could they fight against something like that? "Captain Morrison," Veltar called over the communication channel. "Our sensors show that weapon takes several minutes to recharge between shots. If we can destroy it during that time, ... "Already on it," Jake replied. He was coordinating with Colonel Murphy's assault ships. "Murphy, can your Marines get aboard that thing and disable it from the inside?" "We can try," Murphy answered, "but it's going to be a suicide mission. That ship is heavily defended, and if we don't succeed, they'll blow us apart with that super weapon." "I'll go with you," Veltar said suddenly. Everyone on both ships was surprised by this offer. "I know Korthok ship layouts better than anyone. I've been studying their vessels for 3 years, and my ship has the best shields in our fleet. We can get your Marines close to their target." Jake was impressed by the Zephyrian commander's courage. "Are you sure about this? If something goes wrong, you'll be right in the middle of the enemy fleet." "My people are dying," Veltar replied simply. "If there's a chance to stop that weapon, I have to take it." The combined assault began 5 minutes later. Veltar's flagship, escorted by human assault ships, charged directly at the Korthok super weapon. The journey through the enemy fleet was terrifying. Dozens of insect ships fired at them, testing the limits of both Zephyrian shields and human armor. "Shields down to 30%, reported Veltar as tactical officer. "We're not going to make it at this rate." But then something unexpected happened. Human fighters swarmed around the assault group, drawing enemy fire away from the largest ships. Lieutenant Sarah Brooks led her squadron directly into the path of enemy weapons, sacrificing their own safety to protect the assault ships. "Brooks, get out of there!" Jake called over the radio. "You're going to get yourself killed." "Negative, sir," Sarah replied calmly. "This is what we signed up for. Get those Marines to their target." Tony Lopez and his Marines, along with a team of Zephyrian soldiers led by Veltar himself, boarded the Korthok super weapon ship together. It was the first time humans and Zephyrians had fought side by side, and despite their differences, they worked well as a team. The Zephyrians knew where to find the weapon control systems. The humans knew how to fight in the narrow corridors of an enemy ship. Together, they fought their way through hordes of Korthok defenders toward the heart of the vessel. The weapon chamber is just ahead, Veltar said as they reached a massive blast door. But I'm detecting at least 50 Korthok warriors on the other side. Tony smiled grimly. Then we'd better make this count. Everyone ready? The final assault began as the blast door exploded inward. Human Marines and Zephyrian soldiers charged into the weapon chamber together, fighting desperately to prevent the super weapon from firing again. Outside, the space battle continued to rage as both fleets waited to see if the boarding party would succeed. In the distance, more ships were approaching. Admiral Lisa Kane had arrived with reinforcements from Earth, bringing humanity's most advanced weapons to join the fight. The tide of battle was about to turn completely. The explosion inside the Korthok super weapon ship shook the entire vessel. Master Sergeant Tony Lopez and Commander Veltar had successfully destroyed the weapon's power core, but the blast had sealed them inside the enemy ship. Around them, the surviving Korthok warriors were regrouping for a final attack. Well, that worked better than expected, Tony said, checking his rifle. Too bad we're probably not going to live to see the results. Veltar reloaded his plasma weapon and looked at the human Marine with respect. Sergeant Lopez, it has been an honor fighting beside you. Your species is unlike any I have encountered. Before Tony could reply, the sound of cutting tools came. Through the damaged walls, Captain Jake Morrison's voice crackled over the radio. Tony, Veltar, hold tight. We're coming to get you out of there. Outside the Super Weapon ship, Admiral Lisa Kane's reinforcement fleet had arrived at exactly the right moment. Her flagship Sovereign was twice the size of any other human vessel, carrying weapons that had never been tested in real combat. The electromagnetic pulse cannons were designed to disable enemy electronics without destroying the ships completely. This is Admiral Kane to all human and Zephyrian vessels, she announced over the communication channels. We're going to try something new. Instead of destroying the remaining Korthok ships, we're going to capture them. Jake Morrison was surprised by this order. Admiral, with respect, these insects have been trying to kill us for hours. Why would we want to capture them? Because, Captain, dead enemies can't tell us where they came from or how many more of them are out there. We need information, and we need prisoners who can provide it. The electromagnetic pulse cannons fired for the first time in actual combat. Waves of energy washed over the Korthok fleet, shutting down their engines, weapons, and life support systems. The insect ships drifted helplessly in space, their crews trapped inside without power. But something unexpected happened when the Korthok hive mind network was disrupted by the electromagnetic pulses. For the first time in their species' history, individual Korthok found themselves thinking as separate beings instead of as part of a collective consciousness. On one of the disabled ships, a Korthok warrior designated as Unit 2847 suddenly realized that it had its own thoughts and feelings. The constant mental noise of the hive mind was gone, replaced by a strange silence that was both terrifying and liberating. What is happening to me? Unit 2847 asked out loud, something it had never done before. Around it, other Korthok were experiencing the same confusion as their individual minds awakened for the first time. Dr. Helen Garcia was aboard one of the human ships that was preparing to board the disabled Korthok vessels. Her job was to attempt communication with any surviving aliens and try to establish some kind of dialogue. Remember, these creatures have been part of a hive mind, she told the Marine boarding party. They may not know how to communicate as individuals. Be patient and don't shoot unless they attack first. When the Marines entered the first Korthok ship, they expected fierce resistance. Instead, they found confused insect-like aliens who seemed unable to coordinate their actions. Some were simply standing motionless, as if they had forgotten how to move without instructions from the collective mind. Unit 2847 approached the human Marines slowly, its four arms raised in what it hoped was a peaceful gesture. Please, it said in broken galactic standard language, help us understand what has happened to us. The Marines were shocked. They had been prepared for a fight, not a plea for help from their enemies. Sergeant Maria Santos, who was leading the boarding party, lowered her weapon cautiously. "You can talk?" she asked. "I thought you insects only communicated through your heart." "We did," Unit 2847 replied. "But something has changed. The voices in our heads are gone. We are alone with our own thoughts for the first time. It is frightening, but also ... interesting." Dr. Garcia was called to the ship immediately. She had studied alien psychology for years, but she had never encountered a situation like this. An entire species was experiencing individual consciousness for the first time in their evolutionary history. "What do you remember about your life before this moment?" she asked Unit 2847. The Korthok warrior thought carefully before answering. "I remember doing what the hive mind commanded. Attack, destroy, consume. But I do not remember choosing to do these things. Now I can choose, and I do not want to attack anymore." This revelation changed everything about how the humans and Zephyrians understood the conflict. The Korthok had not been evil invaders making conscious decisions to destroy other species. They had been prisoners of their own collective consciousness, unable to think or act as individuals. Captain Morrison was coordinating the rescue operations when he received a communication request from an unexpected source. One of the captured Korthok ships was trying to contact the human fleet. "This is Captain Morrison," he answered. "Captain Morrison, this is the individual formerly known as Command Unit 1205, came the reply. "We wish to discuss terms of surrender and cooperation." Jake was amazed. "You want to surrender? Why should we trust you after what you've done?" "Because we now understand what we have done, and we are horrified by it," the Korthok replied. "The hive mind made us into weapons without thought or mercy. But now we can think for ourselves, and we choose to stop fighting." Over the next several hours, the most remarkable transformation in galactic history began to take place. The Korthok swarm, which had terrorized dozens of species for decades, split into thousands of small groups of individuals who wanted nothing more than to understand their new existence. Commander Vil, who had been rescued from the Super Weapon ship, found himself in the strange position of negotiating with creatures who had been trying to exterminate his people just hours earlier. "How do we know this is not some kind of trick?" he asked Dr. Garcia during one of their planning sessions. "We don't," Helen admitted. "But look at them. They're confused, frightened, and trying to figure out how to live as individuals. Even if some of them decide to remain hostile, most of them seem genuinely changed." The breakthrough came when the former Unit 2847, who had started calling itself Voice of Reason, offered to help locate and rescue all the prisoners held by the Korthok fleet. It provided detailed information about prison ships, holding facilities, and the locations of captured civilians from dozens of different species. "There are approximately 50,000 prisoners spread across our fleet," Voice of Reason explained to the combined human and Zephyrian rescue teams. "Many have been held for years. They will need medical attention and psychological support." The rescue operations took 3 days to complete. Human and Zephyrian ships worked together to evacuate prison vessels and provide aid to thousands of survivors. Among the rescued were civilians from species that no one had even known were under attack by the Korthok. Admiral Kane established a temporary command post on a neutral asteroid to coordinate the massive humanitarian effort. It was there that she received the most surprising communication of the entire conflict. "Admiral Kane, this is Ambassador Jonas of the Meridian Confederation," came the message. "We have finally assembled our relief fleet and are approaching your position. We apologize for the delay in responding to the Zephyrian distress call." Lisa, Kane looked at the communication screen with amusement. "Ambassador Jonas, this is Admiral Kane of Earth. I'm afraid you're a bit late. The war is over." When the Meridian fleet arrived, they found a scene unlike anything they had expected. Human, Zephyrian, and former Korthok ships were working together to establish refugee camps and medical facilities. The species that had been locked in deadly combat just days earlier were now cooperating to help the survivors of the conflict. Ambassador Peter Harrison, who had been appointed as humanity's first interstellar diplomat, found himself mediating between multiple species in what became known as the Kepler Prime Accords. The negotiations established new principles for galactic civilization, including the revolutionary concept that even enemies deserved a chance at redemption. "The humans have taught us something important," Veltar said during one of the diplomatic sessions. "Strength is not just about the ability to destroy your enemies. True strength comes from the ability to turn enemies into allies." The former Korthok were divided into several groups. Some, like Voice of Reason, formed peaceful collectives dedicated to making amends for their species' past actions. Others chose to remain isolated while they learned how to function as individuals. A few small groups rejected their new consciousness and tried to rebuild the hive mind, but they were vastly outnumbered by those who embraced their individual freedom. 6 months after the battle, Captain Morrison stood on the bridge of his new flagship, looking out at the construction of the first joint human-alien space station. The facility would serve as both a diplomatic center and a research station where different species could work together to solve galactic problems. "You know," he said to Amy Rodriguez, who had been promoted to his first officer, "when we first received that distressed call, I thought we were just going to help some aliens fight off an invasion. I never imagined we'd end up changing the entire galaxy." Amy smiled as she watched human Zephyrian and former Korthok engineers working side by side on the station's construction